Hey, this is Nathan.
And this is Thomas.
Today on Not the Pastor, we're going to talk with my good friend, Tim Athey, who is involved in deaf ministry. And he is going to talk with us a little bit about what's involved in that, maybe how to get a deaf ministry started. And basically, he's just going to give us a good reminder to not forget about a group of people that could be right around us and yet really not even getting any attention when it comes to the gospel. So you listen in. It's going to give some good, helpful pointers and tips on a deaf ministry. Well, Tim Athey, thank you so much for being with us on Not the Pastor today. How about you start off just by telling us, just a little bit about you and your family, where you all live, where you serve, all that good stuff.
For sure. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to be here and share with you guys. I am a blessed husband and father of 7.
Nice.
Yeah. So far, no more on the way yet.
Okay.
I have been a member of Southwest Baptist Church in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, for about 14 years now.
Yeah, cool.
Excellent.
Very good.
So, Tim, did you grow up there at Southwest, or did you move there for school, going to Heartland? What brought you?
No, my family and I, my parents and I, we attended a different Baptist church in the area.
Okay.
And just felt the Lord move us over to Southwest about 2006, 2007.
I see. I guess I didn't realize that your family was from that area as well. That's very cool.
Born and raised Oklahoma Okies.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, good.
Sounds good. Well, we've all spent our time there.
Yeah. And so there at Southwest, you work there in the deaf ministry. Is that right? Get to do that. How long have you been doing that? Just there in the Southwest?
Yes.
Is that one of the questions?
Kind of.
If it's not, it should be. That's what we're talking about. Talking about deaf ministry here today.
Right. Yes. It's a neat story, really, how I got started in the deaf ministry there. When I first started going to Heartland, that's where I met my wife there. She's from Colorado.
Okay.
And she had saw and noticed there was a deaf ministry at Southwest, and so she's the kind of person that wants to dive in and
sure.
get
Yes.
Involved in anything and everything and soak it all up. For whatever reason, I didn't really notice that the church had a deaf ministry.
Okay. You kind of hide over in that corner there.
Yeah. I don't know.
They're not very loud. I don't know if I could say that. Can we edit that out if that's...
Sure, that's right. Okay. Oh, boy.
So anyways, I wanted to sit by her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I,
Smooth
so I was like, oh, there's a deaf ministry here.
Uh-huh.
So I started, we started sitting there and also attending the sign language classes that they have there on every Sunday afternoon. And I just really, I realized that I really liked it. I had an aptitude towards it. I started picking it up really fast.
Very cool.
So, we started that around, 2007 or so.
So that was the first interaction, though, if I understand right. That was the first interaction that you had with deaf ministry or sign language, anything like that. Is that correct?
Not entirely.
Okay.
I had just little bits and pieces growing up, a little bit of exposure to the deaf or the deaf ministry. My mom had a deaf friend when she was in school. I never met them, but so my mom kind of knew a little bit. And then we had a neighbor a couple doors down where I grew up that was deaf, and I actually still know her and talk with her today.
Okay.
But and then the church I used to go to, they tried to start a deaf ministry, but it never really materialized. So I was interested in that as well, but that never really went anywhere, and then just kind of forgot about it after that.
Okay. So you had kind of a soft introduction to it there, but never really seriously started pursuing it until you started pursuing your wife.
Right.
But give us some stats. How many deaf are there in America? Maybe what areas or regions, what states, cities even would have the highest concentration? And I ask that because our listeners may not realize that, maybe there's a lot of deaf individuals around them in their area. So what are some of those stats?
Right, for sure. I'll start with kind of the big picture and work our way down.
Great.
I was searching for statistics online. They're not easy to come by, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. For worldwide, there's an estimation of over 5% of people that have a disabling hearing loss. That's about, it says over 466 million people.
Wow.
That's worldwide. But here in America, there's an estimated 48 million that live with a hearing loss. Also, approximately 600,000 are deaf.
Gotcha.
And but I said the terms disabling hearing loss. Hearing loss,
maybe
deaf.
Elaborate on that for us. What do those different terms mean? That would be helpful.
Well, that's part of the reason why it's hard to nail down any statistics.
Gotcha.
Because it's such a varied topic.
Right.
Are we talking about a decibel range you can or can't hear?
Okay.
Or or not being able to hear at all, or being profoundly deaf, or there's just so many different nuances that
there's degrees to it, levels.
Right.
To it. Gotcha.
There's a large degree. You could have your grandparents, older people who just kind of lost their hearing over time, or you may have people that are born deaf, or severely hard of hearing, or you could have people who lose their hearing due to an illness. Such as spinal meningitis or other things, or an accident or something like that.
Sure.
So there's lots of different causes, lots of different reasons, lots of different variations within it all. That's why it's really, really hard to nail down any sort of statistics.
Yeah.
Somewhere you said 48 million here in the United States would be in the overarching hard of hearing, deaf, those kind of terms would be maybe used.
Right. And just to clarify, kind of what we're mainly talking about today is deaf or profoundly deaf people who, and also, but not just that, but people who would use sign language to be able to communicate.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, and those stats are helpful because I imagine that when most people think of something like missions or taking the gospel to all people groups in the world, they probably think of other individuals in other countries who speak different languages, different dialects, have different customs. And so I imagine that I know from even in my own life that deaf population can kind of slip under the radar because, they're in a large way, they're part of our culture and they would blend in culturally, but they still if you think about it, they speak a different language. And so if nobody's reaching out to them with the gospel, then sometimes it could probably be an unreached people group, I would imagine. And so this is important, what we're talking about. Once you committed to it and you were like, man, this is something that I want to pursue as a ministry, maybe that's 2007 time frame. How long of like seriously pursuing it did it take you before you could speak sign language? I know that's maybe not the best question because you're still kind of learning, and we've talked a little bit about that. You have further testing that you're pursuing and such, but I mean, how long was it before you felt comfortable communicating in sign language? How long did that take you?
Trying to think back, I would say maybe about to be able to like carry on a conversation,
right?
Maybe about 4 years,
okay,
5 years.
Okay.
But saying that, everybody's different.
Yes.
Some people are gonna pick up and learn the language faster than other people.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends.
Well, and Tim, I got to jump in here and just say too that, I mean, you were up interpreting for services, for songs and those kind of things well before that 4-year mark, which doesn't mean that you were comfortable doing that, right? But it does mean that, and so especially for like the songs that you could have ahead of time and practice, like a singer would, then, I mean, you were doing that. I mean, if you started in 2007, I was there in 2008 watching you do some of those things. And so know that was happening much sooner. So I can appreciate the honesty and modesty saying it took you that long to feel comfortable, but also pushing back a little bit and saying you're doing the job much quicker than that as well.
Right.
So
And just learning signs and signing is different than communicating.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, sure.
And it's also different than teaching, and it's also different than interpreting. All those things are totally different.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I guess I knew almost no science and helped in a Sunday school class because I've worked with children and I only needed 2, stop and sit. Right? Those are the only 2 signs I needed. So, they didn't listen to either one of them, so it didn't matter. Very good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if somebody was trying to learn, Tim, maybe that would be a helpful question to answer. What would be the best route? And maybe it is the way you did it. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's a different route that you've been made aware of since you learned. But what's the best way for somebody to learn sign language? Is there like a curriculum or a course they can take? Should they just jump in? What would you say there?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to learn sign language. The worst way is directly from a book.
Okay. They have scratched that one off.
But all of these I'm going to name off, I've used.
Yeah.
And have benefited from. Sure. So it's a tool, but that's not the best one.
Right.
Because you're trying to learn a 3D language in a 2D space. It just doesn't work very well.
Correct. Makes sense.
Kind of the second best way is from like DVDs or online stuff.
Okay.
And there's lots of really good stuff on YouTube. Bill Vikers, I think is how you pronounce it. His stuff is excellent.
Okay.
We'll
probably include some. I'm sorry. We'll probably include some of these at the show notes at the bottom. So you were spelling that. How do you spell that, Tim?
Yeah, that's Bill Vikers or Vikers. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's Vicars.
Gotcha.
And that's on YouTube, so that's free.
Yeah.
And he's got excellent lessons on there. You can just go through it in your own time.
Okay.
And then the very best way to learn is from deaf people themselves.
Sure. Okay.
Whether it be formally or informally.
Gotcha.
You can go and just socialize with them. The deaf people love to socialize and talk and chat. And if you're there to learn, they love to try to help you learn.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you can also learn from people who are not deaf as well.
Okay.
And I've learned from all of these things.
Yeah.
Tim, have you taken any like classes? I know they offer degrees and those kind of things in this as well. Have you pursued any of that yourself, or is that something that you haven't felt like needed to or had opportunity, whatever?
Yes, I have. I originally wasn't going to, but my wife kind of encouraged me to do so. And since she's done that, I really realized that was a really good thing to do.
Sure.
I think it's an important thing to nurture and develop the skills that God has given you.
Yeah.
And so I started taking interpreter training classes at OSU OKC here in Oklahoma City in 2014. And I'm planning to finish next year.
That's exciting.
I've stretched a 3-year degree into, 6? So,
dude, that's awesome. Congratulations, my friend.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. Good.
And that's with not, it, man. Yeah, that's not required, but it's definitely beneficial.
Yeah.
Especially if you just take the sign language or ASL classes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I guess I'm thinking for those people that Jesus put on their heart that they want to do this as a ministry, long term, this is going to be what Jesus called them to, then those kind of understanding that there's opportunities there that you can get like professional training on is helpful as well. It's not all the Rosetta Stone equivalent. It's that you can go to school for this just like you could for a Spanish class or something like that. You can,
that's good.
And even more probably because you can get a license, interpreter's license, those kind of things. So when you finish school, is that something you'll pursue as far as like employment, do you think, or are you gonna like kind of shift that way, or what does that look like for you?
I'm definitely open to that. I've actually done some of it already.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
But it's complicated, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. Now, Tim, this is a little off note, but you speak Spanish as well, don't you?
I do speak some Spanish, yes.
Because do you still work at the same place there that you and I work together, American Cleaners?
Yes. I actually forgot you worked there. Yeah, I do.
Thanks.
It was life-changing for
me. It
me.
Must not have been very long.
No, it wasn't at all, actually. It was a very short while that I worked there. But there was a lot of Hispanic ladies that worked there. I remember, man, you could carry on a conversation with them too. I was always impressed with your ability there. And that does kind of lead me back around to something that you mentioned before, a little bit of aptitude there, maybe having sort of an inclination towards picking up languages, maybe. Maybe I would see this, even though it's, sign language, as still working a lot the same way of learning a new language. So do they have to have that aptitude to pick this up? Or, what's your take on that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the most important thing is trying to follow Jesus's command in Mark 16:15 is he said to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.
That's great.
And that includes the deaf. Sure. And the deaf they have a keen ability to sense your attitude.
Yes.
And if your attitude is right, then they will be kind of drawn to you, so to speak.
That's great advice.
As I was studying and learning at Southwest, the deaf adult Sunday school teacher kind of stepped down suddenly. And at the time, I was the only guy there that knew enough sign language to take over.
Sure.
Okay.
And so Pastor called me up one day and he says, "Hey, so-and-so stepped down. Would you be interested in taking that over?"
Thrust into leadership.
And that was in 2012.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I had been learning, for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And I did not feel ready.
Sure.
Gotcha.
at all.
Yeah.
But really, the Lord had been preparing me
Yes.
Yes. That's good.
for that. So, and some verses that have really kind of become my theme verses are in Exodus chapter 4, verses 10 through 12. And it says, "And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord?
That's good.
Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say."
Awesome.
So, you can try to come up with excuses and saying, "Oh, I'm not ready yet. I'm not good enough. Or, I can't do this. I don't know enough signs. I don't know enough deaf culture," or whatever.
Right.
No. God has made you. He's made your mouth.
Yeah.
He can teach you what to say or what to sign.
Sure.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there that's good, Timothy. You mentioned an adult deaf class. Do you think it's important specifically if you have this ministry where you've got some deaf, individuals who are coming to your church to have a separate Sunday school class for them if possible? Or, I mean, why wouldn't you just put them with everybody else who's their age or whatever and interpret for them? Why specifically a separate deaf Sunday school class?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it is very important for the deaf to have at least their own Sunday school class, and the reason is because, for one, you have a different language, and you also have a different culture, and because of those two things, the deaf learn much better if you have a specific place where they can go and have their own place in their own language, not being interpreted. Because really, with interpreting, a lot of times stuff gets missed. Things, and with the culture difference as well. They like a lot of interaction. They like to be able to kind of talk amongst themselves and just make sense of what is being taught. And just a lot of feedback back and forth. And that you can't do in an interpreted setting. It's just boom, 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 boom,
makes
boom.
good sense.
Kind of information overload almost. So
that's helpful.
Tim, we've mentioned a couple of different times now this idea of deaf culture. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it's a very, very big topic. It's important. Also, the history. History and culture kind of intertwine, and also their language. Those three things: their history, their culture, their language. All three of those things are very, very important to deaf people, and they've been through a lot of oppression over the years, whether it be intentional or not. They have, and so that kind of overall kind of places a bit of a mistrust for a lot of people who aren't deaf.
So
one of the things that is important for us as trying to minister to them, trying to reach them, is to build a relationship with them and build trust with them, so that they see that we're not just trying to take over or trying to force something upon them.
That's good. I think one of the things that always struck me too was just how different one needs to communicate. So many of our songs, so many of our even preaching are built in with like these idioms and all of these things that we talk about the way things sound and how we compare them to other things that sound thing. And those things don't translate to somebody who can't hear. And those, like, something that I just take for granted totally is not. I remember one time sitting there talking, and preacher goes on and on about the sound of a hammer or a nail getting hit on a hammer, and trying to and making the connection of Jesus being nailed to a cross, right? And I remember sitting there next to people that are looking around going, this doesn't make any sense to me in some ways. Like I can see it, but I've never heard that. And that doesn't bring the same kind of memories for them. And so,
and that kind of thing is what another reason why having their own class, is important. Just being culturally sensitive and not bringing up those type of things. It doesn't fit who they are. Why would they care?
Yeah. Well, Tim, maybe somebody is listening to this and they're at a church that doesn't have a deaf ministry. They maybe are listening to this and realize, wow, this is something that I can or should do. God's placing a burden on their heart. How do you start something like this, especially if maybe there's nobody in your church who can interpret for the deaf? Because that would obviously be a very helpful tool, as if you had an interpreter. But how do you start something like this from the beginning? What would be the first step or 2 or 3 steps to get something like this going?
Right. And I'd say the first thing would be to see the need, kind of like what we've already talked about.
Good.
And also pray.
Yeah.
Prayer, I've seen, has a very big role in the deaf ministry. Any ministry, obviously.
Of course.
But and specifically praying for laborers, as the Bible tells us to, and be willing to be that laborer. If you might be listening to this and be like, I wonder who could.
Right.
Maybe God's saying,
yes,
you.
Yeah. You might get a phone call from your pastor saying, hey, I need you to teach Sunday school this week.
Yeah. In sign language.
Right.
Right. And then also pray that the Lord would help you in learning sign language and deaf culture, and in being able to just meet deaf people, and then obviously talk with your pastor. Kind of develop a plan. How are we gonna start the process? Lay out some milestones to kind of work towards it. And just being able to, you kind of have to find deaf people. You have to know where they congregate.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Because I kind of refer to the deaf as the invisible people group.
Okay.
Because if you look at a picture of a bunch of different people, you have no idea if they're deaf or not.
Right. Yeah.
So you can't go by that, obviously. So you have to know where they congregate.
Yeah.
And they love congregating. They love.
So they are meeting somewhere.
Yes.
Okay.
In Oklahoma City, for example, they have different things called like deaf chats.
Okay.
They meet at Starbucks or Panera Bread, or they even have a gathering at the college at OSU OKC here.
Sure.
And also, if your town has a deaf school nearby, there's going to be a larger percentage of deaf people around you as well. And also another way you can try to find deaf people is if a nearby university has an interpreter training program, they're going to know all these meetings, because they're going to send their trainees there to mingle with the deaf. So they're going to have a list of different places as well, and you can search online, Facebook or whatever. They're going to be there too.
Sure. It's good. Very helpful.
Are there ways to say, I don't know sign language, but I want to go out tomorrow, and I'm convinced God wants me to start meeting some deaf individuals. Are there ways I can communicate with them without knowing sign language? Can I text them? Can I write on a notepad? I mean, how do you do that?
You can do that. It's not the best way to try to communicate.
Okay.
A lot of them like it if you try to mime.
Yes.
And you can write in text or whatever.
Sure.
But along with that is like what I said before, the attitude, the positive attitude.
That's the open door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just your desire to learn their language.
Gotcha.
Their language is very important to them.
Yeah.
And just try to just go to the deaf events, establish a relationship with them. Don't go there saying the first time you go there, start talking about church.
Right.
Don't do that, because that's gonna scare them away. Build up a wall. Oh, there's the church people. That's all they're gonna talk about.
Yeah.
You gotta kind of establish a relationship with them, and then you've been talking with your pastor, kind of working on a plan, and then you can say, hey, we're wanting to start a deaf ministry at our church. Would you be interested in coming? That type of thing.
Gotcha.
And when you meet a deaf person seems to be interested, you can try to ask for their contact information, but just be careful with that, because they can be not really wanting to do that. But once you get to know them after a while, then
so maybe do some research, find out, search for deaf functions or gatherings near you, and maybe just kind of start going out and mingling and rubbing shoulders, while in the meantime presenting the idea to your pastor, saying, hey, is this something you think we could do, and kind of simultaneously doing both of those things.
Yeah.
Good.
You're obviously also going to be starting learning a language there. I mean, that's you're going to jump in there right away.
That's really the key. If you can't communicate with them in their own language, it's going to be really difficult to minister to them.
Yeah, it makes good sense. It's a similar conversation we would have with any other missionary going into any other field. You need to don't go expect these people to learn your language. You need to go and put yourself out there and show the humility to make the change there.
That's and I think you touched on something there, Thomas. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but it does require a certain level of humility to basically make yourself the vulnerable one, or the one saying, hey, I don't know. I don't even know how to talk, basically. And in this situation, I don't even know how to speak this language. I will make myself the student for a long time in order to win this group of people, man. I can just imagine that does take a lot of humility. So
it's difficult at first, but then once you kind of get the hang of it, they're a wonderful group of people. They're great people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Tim, as we're wrapping this up, what would you say when it comes to deaf ministry, sign language, all that we've been talking about? What's one thing that you wish you knew maybe 10 years ago that you could share with us now? Maybe you learned it the hard way, something you just picked up, but something that you'd say, this is something I want to share with some guys that work at churches that I wish I knew 10 years ago, but I know now.
Yeah. I would say the main idea I want to leave you with is don't forget the deaf.
Mm-hmm.
And, you don't know where they are, but most likely there's a deaf person in your area.
Sure.
And even if there's only one, you're still responsible to try to reach them. In Mark chapter 7, where he left the crowd aside and he took a deaf man off to the side and focused on him. He took extra time with him. He took extra effort in trying to communicate with him and explaining to him what he was about to do. And, we need to be able to follow that example as our Lord did in just being willing to take those extra steps like we've talked about today, and reaching the deaf.
Don't forget the deaf. Yep, it's a good reminder there. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, my friend, for
Yes, thank you, sir.
just helping our perspective today and giving us some ideas of even, man, where to even begin with something like this. So
Yes.
thank you so much for your time, Tim. Sure appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Very glad to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Not the Pastor. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to learn more, Tim Athey would love to talk to you. So you can find his email address in the show notes today. I invite you to converse with him, and he'll give you some more information and just has a wealth of knowledge and good conversation there that you can have with him about this topic. We would also love to hear from you on our Facebook page, facebook.com/notthepastor. Join us in the weekly posts that we have going on there. We would love to hear from you and see comments from you that way. And finally, if you would rate and review this podcast on iTunes, we would sure appreciate that. It's so helpful for us. We do read every single one of those reviews and just enjoy the time and energy that you put into those. So we're grateful for you helping us get in front of more people with those ratings. Until next week, we are not the pastor.